This will be a short description of all my modules in the Eurorack format. This is the format I started with modular synth. In 2009, I decided I want that again in my life. And thank you, Deffer, to have reignited that passion of modular synthesizer. So this is 3 monster case. The one, the tabletop here. This is the 3 row, and you have a 2 row. I could have gone crazy and buy 2 4 rows, but I don't think the ceiling could take it. And my arms too. I'm gonna start at the bottom here. A190-8 is a USB and MIDI to clock converter. So there's already some clock division. So you have your stop, your start and reset, and other functions I didn't go through. And before that, I had the A160, which is the clock divider. So you can take a clock coming out from another module and divide this clock. So you have the divided by 2, by 4, by 8, by 16, and 32, and 1/64. And this module here is coupled internally with the A160 clock divider. Okay, if I take a clock from this trigger, I put it into the clock divider, this clock sequencer will run in conjunction with the clock divider. So this is just 8 trigger out. It's kind of a very basic sequencer, the A161. This is the most recent modules I bought from Deffer, which is the A111-4 quad VCO. So it's 4 VCOs, completely independent, each have their waveform, each have their CV in, and you have a master control for all 4. These modules here, like this quad VCO, the quad VCF, and the quad ADSRs, and the quad VCAs are meant to make a polyphonic synthesizer, like a 4-voice polyphonic. So you have the quad VCF, which is 4 inputs and 4 outputs, but you have 1 knob for frequency. So a bit like a polyphonic synthesizer. You would have 1 knob for the frequency, but there's actually 4 filters under the hood. Same thing for the ADSR. So there's 4 ADSR here, ADSRs, envelopes, but there's 1 button for each of 4, 1 global knob. Haha, quad VCA. Well, they say octal because there's 8 ways to control these VCAs. Actually, it's 4 VCAs. The A132-8. Also here we have the A141-4 and the A105-4. The -4 means there's 4 of them, 1 module. One of my pride and joy, it's the Schwemann. Very rare module these days. This is the VM1 module. It is a synthesizer voice in 1 module. So you have an oscillator, a multi-mode filter, and 2 envelope generator, and all kinds of goodies like pulse width modulation, a mix between the 2 type of filter. You can have a high pass or a low pass. Next to it is IntelliGel Planar 2. It's a joystick, but it's also a CV recorder. So you can actually record the movement of your joystick and replay it back. You'll see, it plays back. But I could also record external CVs into the CV recorder. Another CV recorder is the distance recorder. This looks a lot like the beam on those older Roland from EMW. This will record the distance, just an infrared sensor, I think. And from Flame, these are old modules. It's a C3, a knob recorder, so it will record whatever movement you do with your knob. Sounds great, eh? But there's 3 of them, and you can also put a CV in from an external source, and it's going to record the CV variation. This is a JP synth. It is a buffered multi. It's very useful if you have one CV source that you want to route to many CV inputs, like one CV from a sequencer that would control 8 oscillators. If you do it with just plain multiple, the signal would degrade and you wouldn't have the right tuning for all the oscillators. It wouldn't be coherent. From make noise, these are the pressure points with their brains. Pressure points is basically a keyboard, but it can also be a sequencer, but each pressure point, because it call it pressure, will respond to pressure. How much finger will be touching the surface will be outputted. Then if you put a clock in it, it will actually run like an old sequencer. The Squarp Instruments Hermod. This is a lot of things inside. There's a sequencer, there's quantizers, there's LFOs, there's so many things. It's like a Swiss knife. I also use it as a MIDI router. It can route 8 different MIDI channels to 8 different CV and gates, and there's also many other permutations. I use it in the last video for making a 8-voice polyphonic. One of my favorite sequencer of all time is the A155 from Deffer with its aid, the A154. So every step has a switch, a toggle switch. So let's say if the switch is up, it will go on trigger 1. If it's in the middle, it won't trigger anything. If it's down, it's gonna go to trigger 2. Same thing for the row below it. So for each row, you have a voltage selector and a glide, a portamento integrated in it. Weird thing is there's input for every steps. So you can actually put audio source in there and sequence all kinds of audio source if you would like, or just, okay, this step's gonna have a LFO on it, and this one's gonna have a weird noise. You could have a sequence of all kinds of variation of voltage. The A154 will be the sequencer controller, so they're both internally linked. This is where you do some magic, like I just want the 3 first steps. I want it to go forward or backward or pendulum or random, and then other kind of CV controlled you could have. And it's where also you will output clocks and put an external clock in. One of my oldest modules is the MFB SEC02. It's a very powerful little machine because it has 6 gate out and 6 CV out. These are gates and these are CV. Or you can actually configure it to 12 CV or 12 gates. So it's a kind of a drum sequencer. And there's memories, and you can recall a sequence like this. Variegate, the 8 Plus, is kind of a very advanced version, and it has sliders. Oh, we love sliders. But this one is a monster of a drum computer because there's 8 gate out and 2 CV out. Here's the streams from mutable instruments. It can be a low pass gate, it can be a VCA, it can be just a filter, it can be many things. I did the frequency shifter from Audio Damage, digital frequency shifter. You can make real weird phase shifting effects or pitch shifting, kind of analog pitch. It does not sound like an harmonizer. It will make very squeaky baby voice, but it's weird. You have to look it up. Okay, this is just a mult. It's passive. It's a filler. Oh my God, I didn't notice. My potty is backward. Poor potty. It's like it's been punished. Okay, this is the Batumi with its friend, the Poti. Batumi it's a quad LFO, I could say, but many more. Very syncable to tempo, and it's a LFO that goes very slow, and it can go very fast as well. Beside it, it's the Tip Top Audio, one of my oldest modules, Z3000. It's a smart VCO because it's smart, so you can display the frequency, but it's a pure analog. No system can go without a math. This is an old school math, it's not the version 2. I use this module for so many things. Slew limiter, mixer, envelope generator. Sometimes you just need a knob with a continuous voltage that does that. IntelliGel Dual ADSR. That's a fun module because you plug one gate and the two will respond. They will be normal to the first gate. And it also cycles by itself. The only oscillator from my original system that remains is the A111-1 VCO2. It's a high-end voltage control oscillator. This oscillator will produce one of the purest sine wave. I checked it on my oscilloscope. It does the job and it's stable. Harmonic oscillators from Verbos. What an odd oscillator. It's very fun though. Every time I use it, where I'm gonna go with this module, it's an oscillator, but that will produce very, very complex waveform. My little friend here from IntelliGel, it's a micro scale. This is a quantizer. Dial in the scale that you want and it will output it. Beside it, there's the Metropolis, very fine sequencer with this pulse count, which I never saw on any other sequencer. It's very fun because there's a recall your sequence. MFB drum 04. This is the bass drum. It's good bass drum. The Bassimiliceritas Alter. It's basically used for percussion sound. It's like a voice module. It can produce a decay and attack. There is a VCA in it, a wave folder, and so you can make bass drums, snare, hi-hats, and all kinds of wacky doodles. Stereo mixers. I say mixers because I have two from JP Synth. These are so fun. It's actually one module. It is a 4 stereo input, so you can plug 4 stereo source. Sometimes you need that if you have many multi-effect, like here, which are stereo. So I have 2 of them, but it's not just a stereo mixer, because if you plug into the first input here, the signal will be multed to the 2 outputs. Q-Pass from Make Noise, very, very, very complex multi-mode, 2-headed filter, does kind of a low-pass gate as well. You can ping it. Same thing for the MMG. This is a version from their quad MMG, but it's multi-mode. It's a low-pass to high-pass filter, and I think there's a Vactrol, so you can pluck it. It's very Buchla-esque. The A106-6XP VCF, it's a multi-mode with 16 different type of filters. So you got the high pass, the band pass, the low pass, the notch pass. There's versions of 4-pole, 2 poles. The A121 is a very basic multi-mode filter. I love it though. This is the module that produced the purest sine wave. Push the resonance to max, produce a very nice pure sine wave. I checked all the modules that produce sine waves, and this one produced the purest. And I think it has the same 24 dB low pass filter. This one has the high pass, band pass, notch pass, low pass. This one only have the low pass, but it's more than that. It's a filter, it's a VCA, and it's a pan controller, and then a preamp, and it outputs to stereo. So it's kind of it call it a signal processor. Yeah, it's a low pass VCA and panning module. Beside it, a Maleco dual VCA, a simple VCA with a switch to put it in a linear or exponential. And this is the A141 VCA DSR from Defer. So each of the segment of the envelope generator can be control voltage. And beside it, there's a good old A131. It's an exponential VCA, good for audio. Micro steps, that's like a mini sequencer that will output steps. Here, there's also from IntelliGel. This is from IntelliGel. This is a buffer multiple that is buffered. Here, I have a collection from Tip Top Audio. They're all analog recreation of analog drums from Roland. This is the bass drum. I think this is analog. The snare from the 808. The bass drum here is from the 909. The hi-hats from the 909, which are actually samples. Then you have the hi-hat from the 808, the clap from the 909, but they sound very much like the 808. Beside it, I have the Defer, a BBD module, delay, bucket, brigade, delay. Yeah. Purely analog delay. It's very noisy, very gritty. You can hear a lot of clock noise in it. I think it does 250 millisecond at most. One of my first modules here is the Defer A190-1. It's a MIDI to CV converter. Very, very, very handy. So it has 2 CV out to receive MIDI, and then it converts it to 2 CV. It received the MIDI and converted it to gates and also to clock. There's a clock out, and if you plug it in the reset goes into, let's say, a sequencer. When you stop your external MIDI device, it will send a reset to your sequencer and then reset it to the first step. An old Disting Mark 1. I use this thing pretty much only for a LFO. Nebulae 2 from Qubit. It doesn't say 2, but that's the version 2. Oh, so great. This is my favorite granulator processor. It does something to the sound that I cannot find anywhere else. Even in DAW time stretch, it doesn't time stretch like this guy can. It's very organic. I think I have a few videos using it. The Euclidean Circle, very interesting module by VPME.de. I think it's from Denmark or something. A gate sequencer. So there's actually 6 sequencers in there. And you can do Euclidean rhythm, a very fun concept of polyrhythmic rhythm. The old Braids from Mutable Instruments. It's a macro oscillator. It can be a self-contained voice, or it can also be very analog sounding voice, or a wavetable, FM kind of oscillator. Vulcan modulator. I love Livewire. This is a 2 LFO, but they cross-modulate each other. And it's 80 here. It's called the Mind Meld by Intelligel. I think that's his first module he ever produced for Eurorack. So it was an 8 module for the Livewire Vulcan modulator. So this will output different waveform or select different waveform. And it will also introduce the reset, the 2 oscillators, which is very neat. Kind of sync these LFO to a sequence. It's an oscilloscope just to visualize some sound, and there's all kinds of mode to visualize. We got 2 little tiny 2 HP. So this is just a mixer, and beside it is a LFO. Sometimes you need one more. An oscillator from Noise Engineering. The Cursus Iteritas. It's a digital oscillator. It does kind of wavetable. It's a very creamy oscillator. For a digital one, it's not harsh at all. Beside it, from Verbos, it's like a dual envelope generator, but on steroid. I love that they always put the end of pulse in those kind of modules. This is kind of the mindset of Buchla. Beside it, from Mutable Instruments, the Tides. Well, this is a very versatile LFO. It can be also an oscillator. Beside it, the Platts, weird oscillators. It's a digital oscillator. It can talk. It can also make FM. It can make percussion. A ring modulator from Defer, the A114. Well, this is 2 ring modulators. A noise generator, the A118. So there's some blue noise in there and red noise, low frequency noise. There's the audio from Audio Damage. It's a weird little module that you can use iOS device. Let's say you have an effect processor on an iOS device. Put it into your Eurorack. I have a pair here of Defer 127. These are triple voltage control resonant filters. So they're 3 bandpass filter with each a LFO. I have 2 because I love the effect when you put them together, and it creates a very large and juicy stereo image. The original 2 full-on filter. Another Schweiman. It's a voltage control compressor. I will put a phantom bass drum to sidechain the compressor. So it will make a pumpy sound that was very hot with the kids and back in 2012. A pair of Instant Lo-Fi Junkie from ZVEX. This exists as a pedal, but this will turn your modular synth into an old cassette or an old tape that's been buried in the dirt for 30 years. The Bark filter. This is my desire to own a Buchla 296, but never could afford it. But this is the best next thing. So this is like a big old equalizer, and there's an envelope follower. It's kind of a filter bank. Outputs for each band and also outputs for follower and also inputs for each band. A scooper from Roland. This is a kind of a loop mangler. It scatters your loop. It mangles your loop. So it's syncable to tempo. I have a low pass gate here from Deffer, the A101 low pass gate. It's a Vectoral bass VCF, so you can pluck it and it will make bongos like a bucla. This is a JP synth, a triple attenuator, so sometimes you need more knobs to control stuff. The A199 from Deffer, it's a spring reverb, so there's a tank somewhere in there. And this is a real old spring reverb with a tank. Analog, oui monsieur. Here, this is a vanity module. This is how I change the colors. Oh, and it's VC control, so I can put a sequencer to change the color of my system. I saw it, I needed it. The ZDSP by Tip Top Audio with pretty much all the time the halls of Valhalla from Valhalla DSP. Big, luscious reverb. I use that shit on everything. Beside it, these Trimmon Magneto. It's a digital delay plus spring reverb. Very lo-fi agenda. It's also a clock divider, a clock producer. It never ends with this module. A linear VCA. Sometimes you just need a VCA to process some voltage. The Reflex from Live Loop. No, from SDS Digital. Oh, what a strange module with a high learning curve for me anyway. This one you have to open the book, but it is rewarding. It will mangle your loop and make a nice digital delay and many more. Herb Verb, I bought that because of you, Todd Barton. I had a video where he puts a LFO into I think it was a size and something else, and it creates a weird percussion. This is just not a reverb, it's something else. It makes reverb, it makes very luscious reverb. The VC control of all the parameter, it is a very good sound design tool. From Mr. T. Schreiber, I think, Synthesis Technology. Paul Schreiber? It's a resampling mini delay, so it's a digital delay. Sounds very good. It's also a tape simulator and a BBD simulator, or you can put it clean, which is digital delay. Deffer A183-2, well, sometimes you need to offset your voltage or attenuate it or reverse it. A bit crusher or bit modifier, the A189-1 from Deffer, like this one. It's very gritty, dirty, from 4MS, but you need a clock multiplier. This will take a regular clock and then multiply it into many weird multiplication. If you're gonna go ×2, but it can also become ×4 or ×3, depending on how you rotate the whole thing or CV control the multiplication. Phase shifter A125 from Deffer. It sounds like a MXR, I find. And beside it, there's another phaser from Chaos Device. The Kamienek, it's a nice phaser. It can be very nasty. In this tiny mantis here, mutable instruments element. It's a modal synthesizer. It will model digitally what happens to a string or a skin or the air inside a pipe. The rings does a bit the same from mutable instruments. It's an oscillator, but it's almost like a voice inside. Same thing for the elements. You complete voice inside one module. Same thing for the ring. The clouds. Oh, that's a favorite. I got the clouds for my 5U as well. It's a texture synthesizer. Well, it's a granulator, it's a reverb, it can make echoes, it can samples, tiny loops, produces clouds, I guess. CVGT, that's my little secret weapon from Sinovatron. This is what I will convert the voltage to a bucla, from Eurorack to bucla, or from bucla to Eurorack. The first version of the Nebulae from Qubit, I still love it. There's something, again, with how it will time stretch the sound that's not like the version 2. But this one is mono. Version 2 is stereo. A good old mixer, a 138 from Deffer. Well, that's a mixer. It's exponential, so it's good for sound. Yarns! I used it a lot before I got the Hermod because I could make a 4-voice polyphonic synthesizer, but there's also a sequencer in it. There's arpeggiator. There's many things. It's a MIDI to CV converter mainly. The A147, it's a controlled voltage LFO, so you can control the frequency of the LFO. A dual trigger delay, which is the A162 from Defer. Well, sometimes you want to delay your trigger. It's an exponential mixer. The Dave Smith character, this is what you find inside the Prophet 12. It will make a bit crush. It will add some drive. It will bit crush again. And girth, so there's kind of a bump into some frequency. There's a distortion from Defer, the A136. It's a good old analog distortion. Distort the sound. Demora from Roland, a good digital delay. And it has so many other things under the hood when you plug it into an app on the computer or an iOS device. There's LFOs, there's almost a whole synth inside those. Same thing as the scooper here. A dual slew limiter, well, that's like 2 portamentos. Okay, this one is good for when the range is for everything going up, and this one is for everything going down. It's fun. A dual attenuator, well, sometimes, again, you need more knobs. And lastly, the 142 VCD. It's just a decay, but it's VC controlled. You can control the decay length with control voltage. Here's a tour of my patch cords. These are all my original Defer patch cords. Still like them. They're useful. And here I have the shorter ones, the very short yellow ones. Very practical when you use this kind of module here, because the key is to always use the shortest possible cable. And here I have my rack of long patch cord and a lot of stackables. I love those stackables. I hate using mults, so I use stackables, but sometimes it's not enough. You have to use buffer mult, some other kind of patch cords. There it is. Bye bye.